My husband asked me to cook for his mistress to prove I am a good wife. He brought her right into our house for dinner, pointed at her, and told me to cook for her. He looked at me with absolute disgust and said I needed to learn how to be a real woman just like her. He said maybe then I wouldn't be so incredibly cold and useless. I was standing right there in the middle of my own kitchen in Houston, Texas. I was wearing the exact same apron I bought right after our wedding, and I just stood perfectly still while my husband pulled out a dining room chair for his pregnant mistress. My name is Amber. I am 29 years old. My husband is Kyle, and he is 32. We have been married for 6 years. He runs a local roofing company that his dad Frank built completely from nothing. Frank is 58, a massive, loud man who still works out on the sites every day, and he has been married to Kyle's mom for 35 years. Exactly 3 months ago, Kyle started coming home incredibly late. He always blamed it on the roofing jobs running long into the evening. Then he started acting completely miserable around me. He started telling me I was nagging him too much, that I completely let myself go, and that I simply didn't know how to make a man feel like a real man anymore. A month ago, I found the text messages glowing on his phone screen. Her name was Tiffany. She was 24 years old, and she worked at the Hooters restaurant right down the street from his roofing shop. She was exactly 4 months pregnant. I read texts from her saying things like, "Our baby is going to have your eyes." And I read replies from Kyle saying, "I cannot wait to leave Amber and finally be a real family with you." I didn't confront him right then. I didn't cry or throw his phone. I quietly took clear screenshots of everything and sent them to a secure folder. Last week, I went out to Frank and Linda's house for their big Sunday afternoon barbecue in Katy. Absolutely everyone in the family was there. Kyle wasn't there because he texted and said he had to go do an emergency roofing bid. But Tiffany was there. I walked over to Frank's detached garage to grab some extra ice from the deep freezer, and I saw them. Frank had his heavy hand resting right on her pregnant belly, and he had her backed up against the side of his work truck. She was giggling and whispering, "Frank, you need to stop. Someone is going to see us out here." He just chuckled and told her, "Kyle honestly thinks it's his baby anyway, so just let him believe it. You know exactly who the real man is here." I completely froze in the doorway. I slowly backed out of the garage before they could see me. I didn't say a single word to anyone at the barbecue, but I knew the absolute truth right then. I knew for a fact that the baby growing inside her was not Kyle's. I drove straight home that afternoon and went online. I ordered 2 advanced paternity test kits from a private medical lab in Austin. They cost me $299 each. They were the discreet at-home kind where you just swab a cheek or send in genetic material. Getting Tiffany's DNA was incredibly easy. She had stupidly left a tube of her lip gloss on my bathroom counter last week when Kyle brazenly brought her by the house just to pick up some tools. I got Kyle's DNA straight from his blue toothbrush, and I got Frank's DNA from the plastic coffee cup he was drinking out of at the barbecue, which Linda had casually let me take home to throw away. I packed it all up and sent the samples off to the lab, and then I just sat in my house and waited. Then yesterday afternoon, Kyle texted my phone. "We really need to talk," the message read. "I am bringing Tiffany over for dinner tonight at 7. Cook something nice for us. She is heavily pregnant and she desperately needs a real home-cooked meal. You need to sit there and learn how to be a good wife from her. Do not embarrass me tonight." He actually brought her, right through my front door. He held the door open for her and ushered her in like I was just the hired maid standing in the hallway. Tiffany confidently walked in. She was 5 months pregnant now, wearing a tight pink maternity dress, resting her hand proudly on her belly. She looked all around my living room like she was already planning how to decorate it. "Oh, you have a really cute house," she said, looking at my curtains. "Kyle says you don't really cook much, though. That's honestly pretty sad." Kyle pulled a chair out for her. "Just sit down and relax, babe," he said softly to her. Then he looked at me. "Amber, just go in the kitchen and cook. Make that heavy pot roast you always manage to mess up. And be nice about it. Tiffany is currently carrying my son, my real son, the one you never bothered to give me." I looked at his smug face. I looked at her sitting in my chair, and I just smiled. "Of course," I said evenly. I actually made a very special dinner tonight. A full 3 courses. Just for you two. I turned around and went into the kitchen. I had literally been cooking all day long. A massive pot roast, buttery mashed potatoes, fresh green beans, and hot Texas cornbread. The entire house smelled amazing. I plated the food perfectly, making it look exactly like something you would see on the Food Network. I carried the plates out and served them. I sat down directly across from them at my own table. Kyle reached over, put his hand on Tiffany's round belly, and looked at me. "See this, babe?" he asked her. "This is exactly what a real family dinner feels like. When my wife finally learns some respect from you, maybe we can all just get along peacefully until the divorce is completely final." Tiffany chewed her food, smiled at me with her mouth totally full, and shrugged. "It's actually pretty good," she mumbled. "You really should have tried a lot harder to do this for Kyle." I slowly stood up from my chair. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "I am so glad you really like the main course. Now it is time for dessert." I walked back into the kitchen. I came back holding a thick brown manila envelope. I reached across the table and placed it directly onto her plate, setting it right on top of her leftover pot roast juice. "I made you something else," I told her. "Open it." Tiffany frowned and opened the wet flap of the envelope. Kyle leaned over her shoulder to see what it was. Inside was the official stamped lab report directly from the DDC paternity lab in Austin, Texas. I watched them read page 1. Kyle Carter versus Tiffany Jones baby. Probability of paternity, 0.00%, excluded. Then they flipped to page 2. Frank Carter versus Tiffany Jones baby. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%, included. There was total silence. It was the absolute loudest, heaviest silence I have ever heard inside my house. Tiffany's face went completely chalk white. Her hand immediately dropped off her pregnant belly and hit the table. Kyle started stammering. "What?" he whispered, grabbing the paper from her. "What the fuck is this?" I looked right at him. "Your mistress is absolutely pregnant," I said smoothly. "But it is definitely not by you. It is by your dad Frank. I saw them together in the garage last week at the barbecue. I saw his hand on her belly. I collected the DNA and I tested it. That is your little baby brother growing in there, Kyle, not your son." Tiffany started frantically crying and shaking her head. "No!" she shrieked, backing away from the table. "No, that's entirely fake. You completely made that up. Frank told me. He promised me he had a vasectomy." "Well, he lied," I told her, my voice completely flat. "Just like you lied. And exactly like Kyle has been lying to my face for 4 months." Kyle stood up so incredibly fast that his heavy wooden chair tipped over and crashed onto the hardwood floor. He screamed directly at Tiffany's face. "You told me this baby was mine," he roared, his neck turning red. "You told me Amber was completely barren, and you were my second chance at a family. You were fucking my dad? My dad?" Tiffany grabbed her cheap purse off the table and bolted for the front door. Kyle sprinted right after her, chasing her out onto our concrete driveway, screaming his lungs out in front of all of our quiet neighbors. I didn't follow them outside. I just stayed inside the house. I sat back down at the table and quietly finished my pot roast. It was actually cooked perfectly. Barely 20 minutes later, Frank's heavy work truck pulled up outside. Linda called my cell phone, screaming hysterically. "What the hell did you just do?" she shrieked into the receiver. "Frank just confessed everything to me." Kyle slowly walked back inside the house, completely alone. He walked over to my table, sat down heavily in his chair, put his head in his hands, and just stared blankly at the paternity test sitting in the gravy. "Amber," he whispered, completely broken. "I am so sorry. I honestly didn't know." "You brought a 24-year-old pregnant girl into my house," I said, looking down at him. "You told me to cook a meal for her to prove I'm a good wife. You made me stand here in my mother's apron, at my own dining table." I reached back and untied my apron. I took it off and carefully folded it on the back of my chair. "I am a good wife," I told him. "I was a great wife. I cooked for you for 6 years while you were out fucking a Hooters waitress who was busy fucking your own father. Dinner is completely over. Get out of my house right now. My lawyer will formally serve you, and Tiffany and Frank tomorrow morning. And I am keeping this house, because the deed is in my name because my dad bought it for us, remember? He didn't argue. He just stood up, crying like a child, and walked out the front door. Last night, Linda sent me a vicious text message. "You completely ruined this family," she wrote. I typed my reply and hit send. "No, Linda. Your son boldly brought his father's pregnant girlfriend home and asked his wife to cook for her. Your family completely ruined itself. I just served the dessert." I sat down at the table and ate the rest of the pot roast completely alone. It was the best meal I have ever cooked.